After a year in Russia seeing the good, the bad, and the crazy, I finally feel like I'm hitting my touristy stride. I've seen all the major touristy traps by now, so I think it's time to make my way around to the more sultry underbelly of the country. This week, I once again got to take a weekend away from Moscow to check out another 2 Golden Ring stops, Vladimir and Suzdal. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia has invested quite a lot of money into their tourism infrastructure. Many cities farther outside the 2 historic capitals that most tourists typically see have received massive renovations. They've had large-scale cleanups and designed tourist routes that make it easier than ever to escape the post-utopian barriers of Muscovy. These renovated smaller cities are locally termed the Golden Ring because it makes a drivable circle around them. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to the first city on this weekend excursion 200 kilometers outside the capital, the historic capital of Vladimir. Vladimir was one of the medieval capitals of Ruthenia and has many structural and cultural artifacts from that era. Vladimir on its own is in possession of at least 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, at least that I know of, and we got to see all 3 of them in a single day. The first thing you'll notice when you come to downtown Vladimir is how almost all the roads lead to the first UNESCO World Heritage Site location, the Dormition Cathedral. This cathedral is the pinnacle of what to see in this city, so it's where we wanted to begin. It was built in 1160 by Andrey the Pious, who is still interred here as a saint of the Orthodox Church. He promoted the Theotokos, the Mother of God, as the patron saint of his lands here in Vladimir. This church is unique as it has the beginnings of the famous Vladimir church carvings on the outside, which is what many of the churches here are famous for. And it was at one point the largest church in all of Ruthenia. The church is also a historic landmark because of an all-too-common event here in Russian history, the invasion of the Mongolian hordes. As a matter of fact, Batu Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, set siege to this city in 1239 in order to expand the Mongolian Khanate as far as Europe. It was said that St. Andrew's wife, the Grand Duchess Agafia, and almost all the women of her court locked themselves into the secure walls of the cathedral during the infamous raid. The city fell despite putting up a fight, and the entire inhabitants of the cathedral sadly met the same fate. The Mongolians set fire to the cathedral, killing all the women and children inside. Today, these women are all canonized as saints and are still interred here inside the cathedral. You can still see Agafia here in the farthest northern inlet in the necropolis wall. But the cool stories don't stop there. This church also contains the only original preserved Andrey Rublev art still on the walls of the church anywhere. Now, I've gotten to talk about Andrey Rublev ad nauseum here on my channel, but for those of you who don't know, Rublev was one of the most famous medieval artists in the world and is renowned both inside and outside of Russia for his original style of iconography. The thing is, most of the time you can only see these icons on display in museums. They usually remove them from these churches. But this church is one of the only exceptions that are left in the world. All these older looking icons on the walls are from the 12th century. You're literally seeing a living tradition, something that has been here essentially unchanged for 1,000 years. And even saying that just now is kind of hard to imagine for someone. It was for me, at least until I went there and I saw it for myself. The proof of this ancient worship is written all over the walls. But the art aside, this church has dozens of saints buried here, with 2 in particular that you may or may not have heard of that are worth reading about, studying, and visiting when you come. Firstly, there's Prince Andrew the Pious, who I mentioned earlier, who built this cathedral. And second is St. Alexander Nevsky, the Prince of Vladimir who preserved the faith of his land against unbelievable odds. During his life, he fought off the invading German and Swiss invaders, which was even more real for me as I got to visit one of his northern fortresses he used here to defend Ruthenia against the Swiss invaders when I visited Karelia last May. Along with this, he's probably most famous for being the man who made the agreement to join the Mongolian Khanate as a vassal state in order to preserve the Russian religion, Eastern Orthodoxy, against the invading Catholic West who desired to submit their country to the Pope. For him, it was better to be Orthodox and under these Muslims as a political ruler who allowed them the freedom of their religion, rather than being under the West and the Pope, who, although being Christians, would not allow them to remain Orthodox. It may seem then to you that, hey, this is simply a religious figure in history, I'm not Orthodox, I don't know why I should care. But if you're wondering where a lot of the modern anti-West sentiment and that sort of mixing of national and church identity here in Russia, where that came from, you don't need to look any further than Nevsky to start trying to work back to the present. He's so famous, and his influence is so massive in Russia that even during the atheist age of the Soviet Union, they made a movie about him to inspire the Russian people against the invading German army during World War II. It may seem innocuous, but it truly takes a lot for a saint and religious figure to get a Soviet-era film made about him, and this guy got that opportunity. So that's unique in and of itself. So when you come here, don't forget to check out this amazing temple along with its stunning overview from the park down below. When you exit the church, you'll walk about 5 minutes to the edge of where this large slope of the former castle complex was built on. And it's probably the best view of the entire city in at least my humble opinion. You'll know you're at the right place if you see the statue of the man himself, Alexander Nevsky, and it actually overlooks the area where the Mongolians first set up their invasion camps here. Beyond being the best selfie place in the entire city, I think it's good to use this park to sort of decompress from everything you just saw in the cathedral. These Orthodox cathedrals just inundate you with information and experience, and it can be overwhelming. And then after you've had a chance to breathe out and take in the beautiful scenery, you can move on to the next location, which is right next door. Just walk down towards this beautiful second museum, which we decided not to visit just because we had time constraints, to try and catch the next UNESCO World Heritage Site this town has, the Saint-Demetrius Cathedral. On the back side of that museum, finished in 1197 by St. Andrew's son and official owner of the single most Game of Thrones name of all time, Vsevolod the Big Nest, on account of him having many children. St. Demetrius' cathedral is the most Greek thing that you'll see for thousands of kilometers in basically every direction. You see, the Big Nest was actually raised not in Russia, but as a court prince in the Byzantine court in Constantinople. When he was there, he became acquainted with Eastern Greek culture, as his mother was actually a Greek, a princess of the empire named Helena. Then, when he came of age, he moved back to Ruthenia to take up the mantle of Prince of Vladimir. Thus, this cathedral, which used to be inside the palace itself, it was actually inside the courtyard and remained that way until the Soviets tore down the palace around the 1960s, is just littered with Greek influence. It's too cold for me to talk on camera. Sure is pretty though. On the outside of this personal church, you'll find thousands upon thousands of carvings, and I'm not being hyperbolic. These carvings are exactly why this place and many places in Vladimir are considered a World Heritage Site. Carvings are actually pretty rare in Russian Orthodoxy, and seeing these Greek-styled ones this far outside of Greece or this far outside of the Byzantine Empire is incredibly impressive. You can see carvings of anything from regular stuff like flowers and trees, all the way to Russian folk tales, the prince's family, as well as biblical kings like David and other warrior kings and saints. Now, all of this you expect of a church, but strangely, the carvings, which most people kind of raise an eyebrow at, and what makes this church so interesting, aren't any of those. The strangest part is the carvings of things like Hercules, Alexander the Great, dragons, and even griffins, homunculi, not even to mention all the various references to pagan beliefs, both Russian and Greek. All of this on an ancient northern Russian church in the middle of Ruthenia is unique enough to want to film the entire exterior forever, and we tried, because we wanted to find every single piece on the outside of this place, but we didn't want to miss the inside either. Inside, there are frescoes and carvings from the 12th century that are still intact. You can actually see a little glimpse, at least, of how a prince of Ruthenia and his personal family used to worship nearly 1,000 years ago. Most of this temple either was destroyed during various Mongolian invasions or various fires, or just the occasional Soviet renovation, but what remains is still shocking to the senses. This is something that shouldn't have survived. It's 5 times older than my country. And frankly, we should really only know about it as a footnote in history, and yet it does. It does survive, and I got to see it. For me, this experience, this feeling, is something so priceless that I could never pay enough to learn about it or to feel it, so I feel almost an obligation to share all of this stuff that I've learned with you guys, which is precisely what I'm trying to do here. When you've picked your jaw up off the floor, you'll notice that this whole hillside palace area is super unreal. And it grows even unrealier, if that's even a word, when you hear the ancient bells tolling every hour over the vast plains of Vladimir, calling their ancient faith believers to prayer in their equally ancient walls. When you finish there, Vladimir really only has one last thing worth seeing on its own. And luckily for us, it's down the street from the cathedrals on this really pretty imperial-styled main street that is gorgeous and beautiful on its own. But we can't stop here because we have to go all the way in to the Golden Gate of Vladimir. This massive gate was built by Andrew the Pious in 1158. And you see, giant stone gates like these are commonly built to be the main entrance into holy cities as protection from raiders in places like Jerusalem and Constantinople. St. Andrew, desiring the same status and protection for his own lands, decided to have one built for his kingdom here as well. And funnily enough, despite what I told you earlier about their history, the gate was successful. It was impenetrable by the Mongolians. They really could not get through. So, they did the unthinkable. They went around. The rest of the walls of the city were sadly made of wood and earth that now you can actually climb up and get wonderful views of both kids sledding and having the best time of their childhood, dogs playing with their owners and the joy of their faces getting to do so, as well as getting the best view of the gate that's possible. When you come down, you'll be able to walk inside the gates when you cross the street, where a famously hilarious event happened inside their walls. The story goes that Catherine the Great's cart got stuck inside this carriage, or inside this tunnel, because it was tilting so badly, it was falling apart. She was terrified to death it would fall on her, so she got out of the cart and told her best architects to fix this place. Luckily, she did, and now we have it forever. Surprisingly, there's a museum inside the upper floor of the gates, all about the invasion that I really wanted to show you guys, but...
Здрасте, а вы еще работаете? Нет, Эх, не успели. Понятно, спасибо.
Yeah. Basically, the attendants wanted to leave early, even though we made it on time. They didn't want to let us in because I think they wanted to leave, so we didn't get to see it. But that's okay, you know, sometimes that's just Russia. We got to see the gates themselves and walk in between them, and to be honest, it was getting a little too cold to be outside anymore with the sun leaving, so we decided to pack it all up, eat some delicious Russian food, which Vladimir and Suzdal is famous for, so whenever you come here, go find delicious Russian food, and then we went back to our apartment and went to bed early so we could be extra prepared for our next amazing day out in the former capitals of Ruthenia. We were heading to the picturesque country village of Suzdal. But this video will have to wait until next week because I'm literally already almost 2 weeks late with this video. So if you would like to see that video of Suzdal coming up or any of my content while I'm finishing my time up here in Russia, you can subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything and you'll get all of my video alerts every single week. You could follow me on Twitter, catch me on Discord. If you'd like to help my channel spread, it's really simple. You can like this video down below. Subscribing to my channel tells YouTube, hey, we should promote this to more people. And hey, if you know anyone that might be interested in this content, you could share this wherever you think that person might enjoy it. But I have a lot of work ahead of me. I have a whole nother video of Suzdal to put out in less than 7 days, so I need to leave. I love you all, love hard, love deep, and I will hopefully see you all next week. Bye-bye.